everybody. Welcome to the Training, Learning, and Development community. Thanks for joining us for this broadcast. Nice to see all of you. Let's see, we've already got a couple dozen people attending live. Jean, thanks for being here. Christiana, Avi. Darcy's here. Kevin Marandino, Mike Peacock, Devlin. Hey, Brian, Shannon, Shaza, Chad, Greg, Gabrielle, nice to see you. Kim Mendelson, thanks so much for joining us today. So today we are talking with Jenn Jacovsky, who is coming to us live. Are you in New York City right now?
I am. I'm in Brooklyn.
Brooklyn in the house. And we're talking about perception in training. And so let me just mention a little bit about Jenn. She's a learning management and project consultant at PowerPlay New York City. Freelance right now, also the vice president of technology for ATD NYC. That is very cool. And so I'm really glad to have you here today. So why don't we just get into it?
Let's get into it.
Yeah, the importance of perception in training. You had after my request on TLD chat and the Slack group, you came back with that one. I was like, okay, this isn't anything we've ever talked about before. The importance of perception in training. And so we have a group of questions to ask you, and folks in the audience, if you guys have anything, please feel free to drop them into the ask a question area at the bottom of the screen, or post them in the chat area and I'll ask. And so let's just get started on this. Jenn, when you're talking about perception, how do you relate that to training?
Well, in a very meta way, you should always be considering perception when you're running training, as definitely as a facilitator, right? Because people are going to receive the information that you're providing in a different way. But specifically, what I'm talking about is on unconscious bias and something called the Ladder of Inference by someone named Chris Agrias.
Yeah. And I don't know if anybody in the chat, if you guys are familiar at all with that Ladder of Inference, let us know. That was a really interesting thing for me to learn about after talking to Jenn about this particular episode. So maybe why don't you go into what the Ladder of Inference is?
Yeah, absolutely. So our brains, I'm just going to get a little scientific, but I promise you it will be short and fun and easy to understand. So our brains receive millions of bits of information all the time, every second, but we can only process a small fraction of that. So we filter things out, and we filter them out by our perceptions. So I don't know in chat if people want to answer where they think our perceptions come from.
Yeah, go ahead. Where do your perceptions come from? And you know what? I actually do have an image of the Ladder of Inference that maybe I'm going to just drop into a share screen here. Let me see.
And your perceptions, another way to think about perceptions are your beliefs. So where do you think your perceptions come from? And while you're typing that, a mix of stuff. Experiences, yes. Shaza, yes. Biases, right? But where do we get these biases? Where do those come from? Upbringing, yeah. It could be upbringing, work experiences, family, our environment, right? Could be anything. So every day we have to process all of this information, and our perceptions are a way to process that, and they're a filter, and we see through that lens. But the very valuable thing and the big aha moment is understanding that lens, that way that we're perceiving something, might not be the only way you can see it. So I'm going to take you through a very easy example of running up that ladder. And by the way, we all have a ladder that we carry around with us every day. But a quick example of running up this ladder, and by the way, you don't have to have a car or even drive to understand this example. So I am sitting in my car. I'm in a parking lot. I have my blinker on, ready to pull into this coveted parking spot. The person pulls out, and just before I get to pull in, somebody swoops in and takes my spot. Now, how would you feel? And you can type this in chat. How would you feel if somebody did this to you? What would you be thinking? Angry, says it says. Fuming. Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting, Kim. Chad says annoyed. Cheated. Out of my spot. Yeah. Yeah. Gabby's having some audio problems. So I'm annoyed. To be honest, I'm pissed. And I'm thinking, this person is rude. Didn't their parents raise them the right way? First come, first serve. I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. No one's going to take advantage of me ever again. So what do? I take action on it. I decide I'm going to go up to this person and let them know what I think. And as I approach their door, they roll down the window. And before I can even say anything, the gentleman says, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. My wife just called me. She's in labor. She's in the mall. And we're having our first baby. And I just realized I cut you off, and you must be so annoyed." So now what just happened? Well, my blood pressure went down, that's for sure. I'm feeling actually a little dumb. And I wind up apologizing. So I just ran up this ladder, almost fell off the top in a matter of seconds. And my reality was not the only reality. And if I had taken a moment to pause and think, and maybe give this person the benefit of the doubt, I would have had a much different experience. But the thing is, we all do this, and these perceptions, these biases are so ingrained in us that you can't fault yourself for doing it. Again, it's the way the brain processes, but you can practice it. It's a muscle.
Nice. Is there any way that, can you relate specifically, like taking a look at that ladder image, like how, like each rung of that ladder, like can you relate it to the story, just so that we have like a correlation between the image and your
Yeah. So this ladder's a little different, but that's okay. So available data in the bottom. Okay, the sun is shining, the birds are chirping, there's a for sale 50% off sign on the windows. Like there's a ton of stuff around going on, but you focus on this parking spot. You select, that's what you're selecting your data on. And this is your coveted spot. Then you name what's happening. This guy swoops in and takes my spot. I evaluate it. I give meaning to it. How rude. How dare he? Doesn't he know, what's right and what's wrong? He's challenging a value of mine, right? And then I decide what I'm going to do based on my assumption, based on my perception, based on my belief, right? I decide I'm going to give him a piece of my mind, right? And then, what happens.
right.
So, but the trick is, before you take that action, is to really kind of try to analyze and test those assumptions. Is there another possibility? Is there another answer?
So it's pretty much, I'm kind of mousing over the area. It's these two items that are kind of key right there, where you name what's happening and then you do the evaluation piece. That's kind of where, the challenging part can come in. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah. And it happens so fast. That's the thing. And like I said, these are beliefs that are sticky. These are things that are with us. So it's normal and natural to be running up the ladder several times a day. But I had an experience once where if a door closed at my office, that meant somebody was getting fired. So now this was a belief, a perception that I had going forward, unfortunately. So then when I went to another employer and a door closed, my whole body just got really tense and I was distracted the entire day and not a very good performer that day. And the reality was that it had nothing to do with what I thought it was, but I ran right up that ladder really fast. And that can happen all the time. You can be passing your manager in the hall pre-COVID, right? And they don't acknowledge you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do you think? I'm curious in chat what people's reactions would be if your manager walks right past you in the hall and doesn't acknowledge you. We're going to have probably a variety of reactions.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it really depends upon what the, your experience prior is with that manager. And I know for me, like switching from a job where I worked for kind of a community organization where everybody was reaching out to one another constantly, just really, I don't know, just super friendly and outgoing environment. And then moving on and working for a technology company where everybody there is pretty, introverted and nobody no one can even look at each other in the eyes. It was such like a kind of a jarring experience. And initially I thought, oh, everybody hates me. This is like awful. It's like nobody wants to talk to me, but it's actually, I was just so used to my previous employer, like working for an open, very community focused organization, going into this new situation where actually after, going out for a beer with some of the guys in the office, I'm like, oh, this is actually, it's just really, really different. It just challenged my perceptions.
Yeah. I mean, and what you said about going out for a drink and really kind of realizing there's a different way to look at things. I know we had talked previously. I came up with my own little term called "Don't get mad, get curious."
Yeah.
And that's not to say running up the ladder is always in anger, right? But for me, it tends to be. But don't get mad, get curious means wait a minute, stop, ask questions, even whether those are questions to yourself or to the person or people you're interacting with, because you might quickly find that your perception is not the only perception.
So Kim is saying, she's like, so it's basically about teaching ourselves not to jump to conclusions. I think we talked about this a little bit, like, in the green room and stuff. But how can is there anything that we could sort of relate this to a training instance specifically? Do you have any ideas on that one?
A training instance? Well, I mean, this gets taught a lot in sort of unconscious bias, right? And it's actually in coaching as well. So I'm a trained life coach, and there's something called perceptual positions where it's often helpful to have a situation that you want to discuss. Maybe it's a challenging conversation that you're going to have, or you bring to the table a relationship that you're having struggles with that you want to improve, right? And you literally embody the person that you're going to have the conversation with. Like, you pretend that you are them. You physically step into a different location and try to talk like them, try to stand like them, and try to think like they think. And one of the questions is, now if you were them, right? And what would they be saying to you right now? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? And it's extremely powerful when you can coach around perceptions, because we all live in our own, in a way, selfish bubble of our own beliefs, mm-hmm. right? And it's hard to understand and realize that we all have different beliefs. We all could be looking at the exact same thing, like a painting, and see something totally different. So we can all be right.
Right. No, I like it. Kim is saying, I think it would be useful with a scenario-based training or with scenario-based training, tell a story knowing that the learner will probably interpret the story a certain way, then peeling back a layer so that they have an aha moment. So yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
insight.
there's a training where we show a bunch of pictures of people, and one is a bald man with tattoos, right? And then the next is the same man wearing a medical lab coat. And the questions that happen are, would you trust this person in both cases to give you medical advice? And the first image comes up and people say no, right? And then the second he puts on his medical coat, it's like, yeah, of course. So yeah, it is, scenario-based training is a good one.
Yeah, I know of an instance where there was part of a team where some of the folks on that team were really resistant to adopting this new CRM, and the trainers were trying to figure out, like, why are these people really, they're not wanting to, they're just failing, they're not participating, they're not going through the training, or they're just really reluctant to submit stuff on time, back on time, and come to find out, they thought that the CRM was more of an assessment tool for how well they were doing their job versus actually being a resource. And so they were, that's the reason for their resistance. And, it took some time to peel back those layers. And so that would kind of be like a useful instance in this case, I think.
Yeah. Asking questions. What's your concern? What are your biggest concerns? What are your fears? Like getting curious. Would definitely have helped in that aspect, to get to really understand where their hesitation is coming from.
Yeah. Here, Darcy has a great comment. I can see adapting this metaphor for the managers in our restaurants. Oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of the restaurant Darcy works at. There's one right down the street. One of our restaurants who are developing their leadership skills and looking to build their ability to remain calm under the pressures in the kitchen. Yeah, I could totally see that. There he goes. Outback. That's right. Thanks, Darcy. And Darcy has a great question in the ask a question area. He's saying, I like the concrete-ish metaphor of the ladder of perception. Are there other analogies or metaphors you've used to help convey this notion to employees or learners?
You want another metaphor? The ladder's not enough. The shovel of perception. No. I mean, for me, it's yeah. Did you ever see any of those images, like the old lady, young lady? There's like those drawings where if you look closely, you could see more than one thing, but sometimes people can't see both things. I don't have one on hand, or I've
Yeah.
I
No,
see
I
some
know that.
yeses.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
as I was saying, it's like an illusion, like an optical illusion, sort of.
Yeah, and when I train on this, I have that in my deck, actually, because it's part of perception. You could be in a meeting with people and people are not seeing eye to eye, and you're like, how can they not be seeing the way I'm seeing? And that could be very frustrating. Well, you might have been researching something for weeks and weeks and weeks and been like really in the weeds, and they're just sitting in the meeting for the first time in a month, and they were just thinking about something else previously. They step into the meeting, they don't even remember what they're meeting about, and like understanding that context, right? So like thinking about how this could be applied in a work situation, you remembering, right, that someone might not be as familiar with content as you are. You could start the meeting by saying, okay, like, this is why we're here today, set the agenda. Does anybody need a refresh or a recap? So this is very applicable to work, to home life, to driving, obviously, especially in New York City.
Yeah. We had talked a little bit about, the idea of your skill, your perception skills. Like, is it a soft skill?
Well, I mean, I would define it as a soft skill, but
Yeah.
what do you think? I mean, I don't know that, does it matter?
Yeah, I feel yeah, I guess that's true. I guess you can ask that question, does it? I think it is because, well, I think it because it applies so universally. I kind of look at it more as a soft skill. Like we were talking earlier, since you used to be an event producer, um, you had to use your skill of perception, um, constantly, I would suspect. I mean, especially with events, it's always about the little things that make the big differences, right? And, and perceiving accurately whether or not a certain situation is, like why it's playing out the way it is absolutely critical. And,
Yeah,
and I believe it's the same thing when you're trying to help somebody, when you're trying to educate someone or train somebody in a certain skill, being able to understand your learner more accurately. That's a part of it.
for sure, for sure. I mean, as an event planner, you never want people to see you sweat. Like I used to laugh when people said event planning was glamorous because they didn't see me on the floor tearing on my hands and knees, tearing open cardboard boxes and crawling under tables.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I would joke that events are like a film, but you only get one take.
Mm.
So you have to really be able to adapt on the fly and think on your feet and not let any of your guests see what's going wrong. And I can tell you there's always something that's going to go wrong. It just
Mm-hmm.
is inevitable. But, like you said, it's perception. And I've had some events. I had an event where someone threw out an item up for auction by accident, and I was on the street of Manhattan in the dark behind the building going through trash. I mean, and people were like applauding this event. Like, so things that I've like, you have no idea, like, but people perceive. And that's the art of the event, right? Trying to make this thing like magic, right? This is what they get to see. What is Kim saying?
Oh, she's saying that's,
Ooh,
yeah.
a book. I'm gonna have to read it.
The Shift by Kimberly White. Um, Man, she posted a link in there.
Yeah,
Does he,
Shelly, I also, you have to have a Sharpie too, right? The event planner's toolkit has definitely a box cutters in there
Mox got a Sharpie and an iPad. Um, so how about
and
this?
a
Like,
charger.
there you go. Getting better at sort of not jumping to conclusions, right? Or analyzing something critically. Is there anything specific that we can do? Is it just, practice it on a regular basis, or what are your recommendations there?
First of all, don't beat yourself up because this is part of the brain. Like this is human nature. We're designed to do this, like I said, because we need to filter. We cannot possibly process the millions of bits of information. I think it's something like 11 million bits of information come in like every second. So, and think about it, the older you get, the more perceptions and beliefs like are ingrained in you, right? And that's so yeah, it's practice. It's a muscle. And I climb the ladder every day. The difference now, though, is I can stop myself before wrecking my day, before thinking that I'm going to get fired because that door is closed. Because that day when that happened, I was so unproductive at work all day. I was tense. All I thought it was, I'm going to be next. I'm going to get fired. But now I can stop myself before tipping off that ladder and saying, you know what, maybe there's something else going on here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And ideally, you can start asking those questions pretty quickly. Sometimes you have to wait, but so yeah, it's practice. It's a muscle.
Right. So is it just a process, like, what's your thinking while this is happening? Is it just a matter of letting go? Is it just sort of like, that process of letting yourself come to conclusions, but then at the same time letting them go? Or how does that work?
I'm not that much of an expert because I don't have that much control Like that would be great if I could.
Mm-hmm.
It depends what it is, right? I really think it's based on how ingrained the perception and value is to you, how important it is. If you feel like that's being trampled upon or tripped on, or, and again, I know I'm focusing on the negative, but it, it really depends, because that track up the ladder can happen really fast.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be lying to say I can always stop it.
Mm-hmm.
But 9 times out of 10, I'm not having like situations on a daily basis that are going to cause me to go, what the heck? Unless, you're riding the subway all day, which thank God I'm not doing anymore. But
Right.
yeah, it's, I think we were talking before, like people use different tricks. Like I've taught this where I've offered people the ladder as a printable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could print it out and hang it on your wall. You could make it your screensaver. Like some people are visual and need visual reminders, like the don't get mad, get curious. My friend and colleague, who I sometimes coach, that for me has been a very easy thing to remember. And she'll say it over and over again when something's happening at work that she's like, I don't think I need to ask more questions because
Yeah.
I didn't like the response to that, but maybe I'm jumping to conclusions.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. Don't get mad, get curious. Kim is saying holding life in an open palm, not a closed fist. That's her metaphor. And I love that. Shelly has a great question. She's asking, what's the best way to exercise this muscle? And like, how have you done it to catch yourself? That's great. I'd love to hear what you think about that.
The best way to, I mean, again, I think it's different for everybody because everybody learns differently. Um, but you can do it with stuff that's past as well. I mean, I'm sure we all have a situation that we reacted to and maybe think we didn't handle it the best way, or you jump to a conclusion. So you can either do some self reflection and think about, were there other possible scenarios that could have been the truth, or if you have the luxury of talking to any of the people that were involved and say, hey, remember that thing like 2 months ago, and this is what happened. Like, how did you experience it? Or but yeah, I mean, I think it's, for me, it's realizing what's going on in me, like what am I feeling, right? And I tend to react more to when I'm having a negative feeling. I want it to stop, right? So that's when I usually catch myself. Well, what's going on in here? Why am I feeling so tense or annoyed or angry? And is this reality, or is it just my reality?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I like it. And Shelly has a great follow up there. She's saying reflection at the end of the day, working on that daily discipline. I think that's a fantastic suggestion, Shelly. Thank you for that. And I don't expect you to be able to answer this one, but I am kind of curious how this plays out in, sort of the work from home, remote, you know, job stuff that we're facing right now, because there is just so much on that ladder between the data and naming what's happening and and evaluating it, that can just be all over the place, because you're just sitting at home behind your computer and you have no clue what's going on. You have no body language to tune into. You might be making, climbing this ladder of inference via, because of an email or a Slack post or something on social media. So that must be kind of, that's like,
Yeah,
that can
well,
be especially challenging.
I mean, sure. I think the audience could probably answer that too. How would you react if you got an email in all caps? What would what would you think is going on there?
Right.
If you are on a video call and someone's looking down the entire time, like what do you think? What's your reaction? Right, right, Kim. I shouldn't say right. Like everybody's going to have a different response.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think it's from my mom.
That's the context is so important. Nancy saying in training, start with learner's point of view, never our point of view. That allows them to open up using their own perceptions. Yes. No, that's great. That's excellent. All right. Well, this is
Yeah,
fantastic.
your mom is if you're like this and you're having a conversation and your mom's like, "Can you see me now?" That would be my mom. Sorry, mom, if she's on.
she's gonna catch this one on YouTube. Well, Jenn, thank you so much for sharing this with us today. This has been fantastic. I love the concept and the idea, and just like having the awareness, to keep perception in mind, make it kind of a priority, especially when you're working with your learners. I really appreciate the share.
Yeah, my pleasure. Really, for me, it's a true aha moment when you can start playing around with this and realize you have more control than you think you do over your reactions, and you can have a much stronger connections and relationships. So
Right.
that's really why I wanted to share it.
Right. And I love that this is coming from a New Yorker. So my sister she doesn't live there anymore, but she was there for a couple of decades, and yeah. I used to love talking to her about her perception of things, just as somebody who was living in New York. So yeah, thank you so much for doing this. I want to wrap up.
If anybody wants to find me on LinkedIn, please feel free.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I want to wrap up by if you can put on your contact info, any if you have a LinkedIn profile you want people to connect to or anything, please feel free to drop that in the chat. And I want to remind everybody on Friday, February 12th, we're doing Community Day, which is going to be super fun. I'm really, really excited about it. You can go to tldc.us if you want to take a look at the event page for that. We have 9 speakers that are going to be doing that. We've got a lot of networking. We have these breakout tables, like a dozen breakout tables, speed networking. I have some vendors that have booths in this thing. So that's on Community Day on February 12th. Please join us at that event. It'll be great to connect with you. And with that, I think we're good. Thanks, Jenn.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Have a good afternoon, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.